Welcome to the Bible Savvy Podcast, a weekly conversation about how to understand, enjoy, and apply God's Word. It's time to jump into a new passage from the Bible Savvy reading plan.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bible Savvy Podcast. I'm here with Courtney and David. And David, you've got a question for us.
All right, guys, it's almost lunchtime. I'm thinking about food. So the banter question today is: if you opened a restaurant, what food would you want to serve? Like, tell me about your restaurant. Mm-hmm. If you had to open it, like, if you have a name, you don't have to have a name. But if it's like, what food are you serving? What's the decor? What's the theme? What's your restaurant?
You got one?
Well, okay, so I kind of have. I have two thoughts. Like, I would want to open like an ice cream parlor. Like,
oh yes,
of course. But I don't know if that really counts as like full-on restaurant, but
depends on how much ice cream you're eating.
So, I mean,
are there waffle cones?
We do
That's
ice
like
cream for
food,
a dinner
right?
all
That's
the time.
If I go to lunch at an ice cream place, are you going to judge me? Like,
no, absolutely not.
Yeah, hey, it's just
there is protein. There is. I mean, I can reason that out all day long. The other one though that I thought of, and like, because you said a name of the restaurant. So one of the concepts that I've always said, man, if I could, so somebody's going to steal this now, but okay, is that I would do some kind of a place where like you could bring your family and your kids could go do like messy art stuff. Like I'm talking like the crazy messy stuff. But it would be behind like glass walls so that the parents don't have to deal with it. We have staff there that does that. And so here's my just name that just came to my head. It's
go for it.
Doodles and Noodles.
Doodles and Noodles. Well, noodles is a good kid food.
And so like you can
Doodles
do
and
it's like you can make noodle bowls with all different kind of toppings on them and sauces and stuff, but like almost like Chipotle noodle bowls.
Yeah,
you can like walk through and like pick stuff.
Totally.
And then
because kids can't wait for a server.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So like they sit, you get your noodles and then you send your kids in and they get to like do all the things. The only drawback to it is that it also makes me think of the doodle dogs, and that's not what it is.
That's not what it is.
You are not, doodles are not allowed in the restaurant.
If they go away and do messy things without me,
yes,
they still have to come back
in my
to
car.
me in my car.
We're gonna clean them up.
Oh,
it's
sure.
fine.
Now,
it's fine. There'll be a wash station.
There's a hose.
It's gonna be great. But it's all those things.
Doodles and noodles.
Yeah, and there has to be like the parents can't get in because you can't all of a sudden try to stop your kid from
being
doing
a mess.
something. Like
Wow.
let them do the things. Okay.
Wow.
Let them do the things.
All right. So my idea is a restaurant where all the kids have sharp objects and the kids and the parents have to be like, nope.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have two ideas. One is just a name. Lord of the Wings. So it would be a barbecue wing place, but it would be, Middle Earth
that.
style.
We can bankroll that. Come on,
we gotta do it.
Yeah.
We should do
Lord
it.
of the
So
Wings.
my daughter just finished reading them, and so I'm like so excited. The other one is a more full-fledged thing, and it is a restaurant, and I don't really care what the food is. I mean, you can just pick. But the servers are all ninjas. And these you never see your server. You just say your thing out loud.
Yeah.
The whole gimmick is like the food appears on your table without you noticing, and your glass gets refilled and whatever. And if you see your server, your meal is free. That's the premise.
Oh, wow.
And the
the
final thing is the receipt comes drifting down from the ceiling, and a ninja star pins it to the wall, and that's how you get your.
Wow.
That's how you get your receipt.
So
what's the name of
I don't
the
know.
restaurant?
I don't know. It doesn't really matter because that sells itself. You just say that's the experience.
Yeah.
So is it wings? Is that Lord of the Wings? Is it
No.
Is it, or
Two different ideas. Lord of the Wings is a wing place, like a barbecue or spicy wing place.
Clearly.
This one, the Ninja restaurant, I don't really care what the food is.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's some appropriate, culturally appropriate food that should go there, but it doesn't matter because the point is, it looks like the building's empty except for us patrons.
Yeah.
And then Ninja stars.
There you go.
So
man, you could like
no sudden movements.
No sudden movements.
The Lord of the Wings, like you could have so many like themed even flavors of the
totally.
sauces, like the lava of Mordor. You you could have it's like the spice.
Mordor,
the hottest,
of course, is the highest heat.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Heat, and then
but some people are Shire level people.
Shire versus. Oh
do you
gosh.
remember when you guys
And then-
learned that I've never seen those movies or read those books?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's another podcast.
We need to turn to Jesus now. What's your restaurant?
Okay. I don't have a cool name like you guys do, but I deeply love breakfast burritos, and I believe breakfast burritos should be eaten for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so if I had to, I would open a restaurant that it's like all different types of breakfast burritos. You know, choose your meat, you know, your cheese, you know, and all the fixings, but it goes in the tortilla, and that's all we do is breakfast burritos. And then if I get to like add my like board game cafe like idea to it, it'd be like burritos and board games, or breakfast.
Every enterprise he does is like and board games.
And
it's like
there are games.
The St. Charles South Elgin campus with board games.
Yes. Done.
There we go. Look out. All right, we should probably turn to the Bible. We are in our last week of Hebrews, so we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 12, towards the end of the chapter here, starting in verse 18. Let me give you a little context. We have been working our way through this sermon by this pastor who is trying to say, I want to assure you that what you've gotten yourself into with Jesus is better than anything else. And it's the fulfillment of all of the things that have come before. These are Jewish background believers. So they are saying, hey, all of this rich heritage is important to us. We don't want to be walking away from that. And so this pastor, the author of Hebrews, is saying, no, Jesus is the fulfillment of that. He's not just more of the same. He's actually that plus some. And so this is another example of that. I said this on earlier episodes, but we picked out these passages because they specifically connect to things we have read in Bible Savvy leading up to this in the Pentateuch. And so we're going to get another example of that in chapter 12, starting in verse 18.
You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time, his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful, and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire.
All right, let's go into observations here. What do you guys see in this passage?
Well, I think, again, titling of this section, right? The mountain of fear and the mountain of joy. So there's obviously a contrast coming, and stories that we've read before. So Mount Sinai and that idea that, you know, God's holiness was dangerous. There was dread, fear, sinfulness exposed. And then in contrast, anytime you see that but, you know, verse 22, but you have come to Mount Zion, and just the difference of God's holiness through Jesus. I mean, it's really a contrast in holiness in a lot of ways. But yeah, that was just the very obvious first observation for me, is like, you have not, but you have come, and that just easy contrast there.
I told my son what, you know, you say, like, these butts are important, and I was like, you got to look for the big butts. And so there's nothing better than an 8-year-old. Like, yeah. It's super silly, but when we get to a passage when we're reading together in epic reading, and it's like, hey, Dad, there's a big butt. And I'm like, yes, it's the gospel in the most juvenile joke ever. I love it.
It's true.
But
look for the butts.
Yeah.
The butts and the and yets. I look for the butts and the and yets.
So you've referenced this a couple times, but just the idea that Hebrews is written in such a way that it sounds like a sermon being preached.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that tone here of of like, hey, you have not come to, you know, these things. Like it's sort of like, hey, feel this tension here of what used to be true, but you have come to Mount Zion, the city of the living. And, you know, it's just like hope is building and building and building, and you know, see to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. Like it definitely feels like the crescendo that you've mentioned of, you know.
Yeah. Well, there is that preaching technique. I'm sure we've all used it, where you have these like lists of things that like compound on each other. It's like thousands on thousands, the church of the firstborn, names written in heaven. Da, 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 da. You know, it's so good. It's so good. So I see two things that kind of feel in contrast with each other. There is the difference between this was a mountain of fear and this is a mountain of joy. So it's like this is something that is undesirable and something that's desirable. But there's also a part that is almost like this is something that's scary and this is something that's more scary. So it's like I'm not sure if this pastor is trying to relieve their fears or stoke them, because it seems like he's doing both. Because here's what he does. He says, look, this was a mountain that you were so afraid, like, hey, Moses, you go do it yourself because we don't want to touch it. We don't go there. But now you can come to this mountain. Awesome. But then by the end it says, and God spoke there and his voice shook the mountain. But guess what? He's going to speak again and the whole world's going to shake. Like everything's going to shake. And so don't refuse the one who will do the shaking, right? The one who speaks, because his voice is going to shake the whole cosmos. There's like, hey, this is better, but there's also, hey, this is bigger. The stakes are higher at this point. And so if he's got a group of people who are thinking, I'm going to walk away from this, there's a certain amount of, hey, you've come to this mountain, don't walk away, because you know the guy who descends on the mountain, right? Like there's, and I'm not sure which way I'm supposed to feel about it, honestly.
Yeah. No, that's true. I do love the you have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. I wrote, that's a huge party. Like,
yes,
that's some good times. If I'm contrasting the two mountains,
yes,
you know, I'm saying the sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I'm trembling with fear. Like, you can't even touch the mountain. And then it's like, but you've come here to this mountain and there's a big, huge party. And to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven, you've come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant. Again, it's like this building up, and just seeing just that difference. But I love that. Thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. That's a huge party.
Yeah, I feel like each of the phrases in that particular paragraph, you could just like zero in on, like the angels, and then like the church of the firstborn. I think you read through the Bible and you like get this sense of like what the inheritance that's passed on, you know, to the firstborn to carry out this responsibility and have this privilege. And it's like, that's you all. Like, that's who we all are. We're all God's firstborn, right? Like, I mean, Jesus is his firstborn, but there's like, we get to become
we get the inheritance. It's
the inheritors with Jesus, co-heirs with him. Like, what a group to be in, you know? Like, in all of these things, you just can dig into all of those phrases so much.
All right, it's been a minute since I've been able to do this, but hey, Clayton, what's with the blood of Abel? So the verse 23 and 24, I'll read it again.
Boy.
You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. It just feels a little bit out of left field. Like we're talking, Jesus, the blood, and it's better than the blood of Abel. And it's not clear to me, like, what is the connection he's trying to make?
Yeah. Okay. So before I try to address it, let me explain how I would go about figuring it out, because that's probably as important for people in this as knowing the answer. The first thing I would do is I would say, all right, do I know the basics of this? Like, if I don't know who Abel is, and maybe you don't, you would want to say, can I just figure out the basics of the story before I figure out why they're talking about him? And usually what's helpful is to look in the notes in your Bible. So if you don't have a study Bible, there's still likely to be a note that says, this is a cross-reference to Genesis chapter 4 where the story is. And you can just go read the story. Or you can just Google, where's the story of Abel? And you'll figure out where it is. If you got a study Bible, I've not checked the notes in the NIV study Bible for this one, but it's likely that there's something there. The other thing that helps is I say, where have I heard this at all? I've been reading through the book of Hebrews. We're at the end. Abel is kind of a left field sort of reference. has this been discussed before? Because some of the things here have been discussed at previous parts, which is why he can just sort of say, oh, the heavenly Jerusalem and all these things. Like, he's talked about these things. So I know that Abel was mentioned in chapter 11. When we did the Hall of Faith last episode, I think he came up in that. So I'm thinking, okay, what does he say about Abel? I might go read what it says about that. And in that part, so this is the story of Cain and Abel. Adam and Eve's kids. Abel offers an offering that God's excited about. Cain offers an offering that God is not excited about. Cain gets jealous and resentful, murders his brother. And so then God comes to Cain and says, hey, what happened here? Like, let's own up to this. And he says, I can still hear the blood of Abel crying out from the ground. Right? It's this metaphor of saying you cannot hide your guilt. You cannot evade this by tucking it away, right? Like, if Adam and Eve tried to hide by covering up with clothes, like, you're trying to bury your brother in the ground, like, that won't work. You know what I mean? Guilt comes out. And so you've got the blood of Abel crying out for justice, right? And so you get that reference in chapter 11 again, saying Abel was faithful and his blood still, called out even after he was done away with. But it's a voice of condemnation. And so to say the blood of Jesus, the righteous one who offered an offering and did not deserve to die but was killed anyway, his blood cries out, but it's not a word of condemnation.
No.
And so it's a better word.
Yeah.
And so that's where that's going. Now, if you're like, I was reading in my own Bible study reading, and you're like, I didn't know how to piece that together, don't sweat it, okay? Sometimes those things is the win is saying, oh yeah, I know the story of Abel. I don't know why it's there, but I know what they're talking about. Like, count that as a win.
Yeah.
You don't have to get it all to get something out of it.
Yeah. Nope. That's good. All right, I got another one. The way it ends is pretty amazing. It says, therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. For our God is a consuming fire. And it's in those little quotations, which again, talking about NIV Study Bible or just doing some research, you'd be like, okay, it seems like there's a quote here. And if you've been reading back in the Pentateuch, you might remember that Aaron's sons had gone into God's presence with an unauthorized offering, and they were consumed by fire. And there was basically a pointing to God's glory, God's holiness, that they came in, and in that way it was separating their understanding of who God is, that we just go and we just access God's presence. And there was that a little bit of that mountain of fear kind of theme coming out. And then so I love how it kind of wraps up this section with therefore, since we're receiving this kingdom cannot be shaken, let us be thankful. And so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. We have access to Jesus. We have immediate connection to our God in a way that we haven't, but also our God is a consuming fire. Like, that is still true. It's not that it's not true anymore. It's that it's still true in who Jesus is. And I just, that's a really cool, I love that verse.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that the interesting thing about that to me, I was hesitating to say something before because I didn't know if we were ready to go to the last verse yet. I thought
let's go for it.
I can't wait.
We were turning things around here.
For that.
But in the section just above that, it's all about earthquakes, right? And then it ends with the fire.
Yes.
Which we know that both of we see God in both of those things throughout the story of Scripture. And so that was what was interesting to me, is that, it went from this earthquake, which is not, it's shaking the foundations, right? It's shaking what I would say the earthly things, right? The created things, and consuming, like, things get completely burned up and consumed. So there was a little bit for me of like, we were talking earthquakes and then we're talking like we're ending with the fire. That was just an observation, knowing that both of those have significance in Scripture. And then the other thing from that sentence was, whenever you're writing a message, you guys have done this as well. You think, what is the behavior that I want the people to have at the end of this? The question we often ask is, what would it look like if people actually did these things? And I love that he says, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. So he gives us the here's what I want you to do. Here's the sermon
the takeaway.
application, right?
I look at that and those two images, right? Like a fire and an earthquake. It's a good connection back to those Sinai imagery.
Mm-hmm.
And here it definitely the shaking is interesting because it's a destructive shaking, but it says so that what cannot be shaken will remain.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says we have a kingdom that can't be shaken. So there's a certain amount of like refining, which also goes with the fire thing, right? Like there's something about the fire that is obviously consuming.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are the sort of people who can enter into God's presence, it's because Jesus has made it so that like we are now made of something that cannot be consumed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're on the other side of this perishable, non-perishable divide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's something that's still like if we found technology that allowed us to walk on the surface of the sun, I think we'd still be like, holy cow, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Right? Like we can be on the sun, but can you believe we can be on the sun? Right? Like that. I think there's that amazement and that humility about that. You don't suddenly become like, equal to God. You're still, he can still consume you in a second, you know? So there's like a gratitude and a fear that go in it. And it's a cool combo actually. My last observation here is that the idea that there's a kingdom that cannot be shaken is just really, really cool. Like there's just a hope to that. I think we live in a world and a life where so many things feel like they could be taken away. You know what I mean? Like we try to ignore it a lot, but there's a fragility to all the things that we feel like this. I depend on these things, and they could just go away. And to say, actually, at the bottom of all of this, for those who know Christ, there's a kingdom that cannot be shaken. One day it's all going to get brought to rubble, but here's something that won't go away. It's pretty reassuring. All right, let's go on to one of the M's in comma. Let's do meditation. What we're going to do here is something we've talked about a lot in narrative. When we read stories, sometimes we say, here's what you should do. You should use your imagination to place yourself in this scene. And Hebrews is not a narrative, but there is a scene being described here. And it's a scene that, frankly, we're all going to experience, right? This is not us putting ourselves back in the day. It's like, what would the Red Sea have been like? Well, we weren't there, but we will be here. So I want you to imagine in anticipation of what this is going to be like, all right? So let me read verse 22 through 24. You have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. All right, let's turn to the next M in comma, message. If you're going to take a principle out of this passage, what would it be?
So my message is simply, it's a privilege to access Christ as freely as we can.
I'm going to go with the application that I talked about in that last line, because I think it does kind of encapsulate the rest of it, but to worship God acceptably with reverence and awe.
My message is also just a quote from this. The kingdom cannot be shaken. Kingdom cannot be shaken. All right, let's talk about application. What do you do in response to this?
Okay, my message was, it's a privilege to access Christ as freely as we can. So my application, I kind of flipped yours into my application, but it's to worship with gratitude and reverence. That, as I enter into, if I'm worshiping in any way, and there are many ways that we can worship. Often we think of singing, but that's just one expression of worship. But if I am singing with my church body, it's gratitude for the access I have to Jesus, and it's also reverence that He's a consuming fire. If I'm giving, like if I'm giving my tithe, or if I'm being generous, it's with gratitude that, hey, God gave this, and and reverence of the holiness of God. And it's both and. It's gratitude and it's reverence.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we go to application, for me, I had written down questions that this kind of brought up for me, convictions, questions. And one of them that I wrote down as a little bit of an application, but it's also how I then flipped into the message, was like, what do I do when faced with God's holiness? And so when my message was worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, I kept thinking as I read this, like, what do I actually do when faced with God's holiness? Do I pursue holiness? Do I pursue the right things? And the other question I wrote down is, what are the shaky things that I'm trying to gain life from? And so I think, I could easily say, well, that message is an application. I'm just going to worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. But that acceptably word means that there's probably some work to be done before I go into worshiping him. And so I think, my application is to really answer those questions. What are the shaky things that I'm trying to gain life from? What are the things that will be shaken, that are going to go away, that will pass away, but I'm trying to gain life from them now, and pursuing them is taking me away from pursuing holiness. And what do I do when faced with God's holiness? Do I, worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, or am I in some kind of fear, or in some kind of, there is a fear of the Lord that, obviously is the acceptable fear of the Lord. But then there's also the wait, am I fearing because I've been putting my faith in these shaky things? Yeah. So I think it's that word acceptably in there. Like, what is it? What do I need to answer before I go into worship God in order to do this in an acceptable way?
Yeah. So my message was the kingdom cannot be shaken, and my application is a little bit similar. It's kind of a question to reflect on, and it's the question of the application is don't abandon the unshakable for the shaking, and it's to ask that question. Okay, where am I actually depending on something that is shaking? And it's similar. Like Jesus does this like with specific things sometimes, where he'll say, don't store up treasures in heaven. Or well, he says that. No, don't store up treasures on earth because moths can destroy it and thieves can steal it and rust can whatever. Like he's saying these are passing. Right? This is actually a bad investment because it's shakeable. But invest in something that's not. And so a lot of our Christian life is saying, let me stick with the things that are actually secure and not believe the lies that these things are going to be secure. And so to examine, like, where in my work life, where in my family life, where in the things that I'm buying into about myself, am I buying into something? What would you?
Apparently, my watch.
Your watch
heard you.
Heard me?
Yeah.
Do you have an answer?
I don't know.
There we go.
So I don't have an answer to that.
I don't have an answer to that.
Well, okay.
All right.
Sorry about that.
But we tune into the things that are actually secure. It's okay. We can keep that in. I don't mind that. I didn't hear what it said. But it's similar. Last episode, I had the question of like, is it passing or will it last? Right, and this is a similar kind of thing. Is it secure or is it shaking? And I think with the book of Hebrews, the pastor here is saying, don't run away from something that is secure and lasting, thinking it's not enough. Right, like they're feeling this anxiety. Like, is Jesus going to be enough? And after 12 and now a 13th chapter after this. He's saying, no, he is enough. So please, 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 for whatever it counts, like stick with the unshakable thing and don't go after these other things that you're thinking right now are going to be good, but they're going to fall apart in the end.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Join us again next Monday for a new episode where we'll be looking at another passage from the Bible Savvy reading schedule. And in the meantime, if you're not following along with the reading plan, check out BibleSavvy.com. Also, you can subscribe and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Email us your questions or suggestions at podcast@BibleSavvy.com. Lastly, tell your friends, and we'll talk to you next week.